So the first thing you need to do is actually install the GDPR framework plugin. So from your plugins menu, you want to click Add New. And in the Search Plugins field, you'll enter the name of the plugin and hit Enter. So now this is the GDPR framework plugin we want to install. Once you've found that, that's the image of the rhinoceros by Data 443, you're going to click Install Now. Once it's installed, you can click Activate. So once it's installed, to access the settings, you're actually going to go on the left to Tools, and then within Tools, you'll locate Data 443 GDPR. From within the settings, I recommend you run the Setup Wizard. This will prompt you through all of the settings that you need to define. So let's initiate that. Restart. In my case, restart Setup Wizard because it's already running. For yours, you'll simply activate the wizard. So this is the main page of the wizard. It will walk us through each element we need to decide. So we're going to click Get Started at the bottom. There's a reminder here that what we're setting up here is the bare minimum template. This is a great starting point. It is not the final information that you want to display on your site. You still need to perform your own due diligence, but this gives you a really great starting point. So I'm going to click I accept. So in the plugin settings, you'll note it's reminding you where your settings will appear afterward. And there's also the privacy tools page. If you're setting this up from scratch, I would recommend you select the automatically create a new page for privacy tools. It will set it up for you. That's what I did when I set mine up the first time. Now, because I'm rerunning this, I'm going to select an existing page. But for the first time, you definitely want to let it set it up for you. So you would click on the automatic selection and then save. So you see the notification that the privacy tools page has been configured. The next section is the view and export. You get to decide what you want to have happen when a customer requests their data. So in the drop down, you'll see you have three options. The one that I recommend is automatically download and notify me via email. This way you'll know which of your audience has requested a download. You can choose any of these three. Once you've made that selection, you need to enter your email address for which you'll receive notification. Because in this case, of course, I said notify me via email. And then finally, the right to be forgotten. So you choose what happens when someone asks to have their data deleted. Again, from the drop-down, you have multiple choices. For me personally, I like to see the notification via email. So that's what I've selected. You can select what makes the most sense for your situation. And then based on your selection, in my case, I wanted email notification. So then I need to enter my email address here as well. And then you click Save and go on to the next element in the wizard. So if you read this paragraph, you'll see a privacy policy will be generated for you based on the information you enter on this page, but you need to modify it later. Now, specifically, you'll need to modify the formatting first and foremost. It's not the prettiest format, if you will. So that's definitely something you want to look at, but you'll also want to read through the text and make modifications of your own. So I'm going to select automatically create a new page for privacy policy. So I want the policy to be generated for me, so I'm going to select the Generate Privacy Policy checkbox. Now you'll see additional information is available for you to enter. You want to enter your company legal name. You'll enter the contact email. Now, the contact email, I suggest you use the email you set up as the data protection officer. Now, you don't specifically need a designated data protection officer explicitly, but you do want to have a specific email designated for that purpose so that you know where that information is going to go. And you'll enter that in the contact email. You also need to enter the company location. This is the country of registration. Further down, you have the Data Protection Authority. So this is not the reference for your site. This is actually the reference for typically your country's protection authority. Now, you'll want to do some investigation on your own for the country in which you live to identify your specific protection authority, and then enter the relevant information in that section. Now you'll notice there's a separate subsection here for Data Protection Officer. Depending on many factors, you may or may not be required to designate a specific person, but you certainly need a specific email reference, which I already mentioned above. I am not designating a data protection officer, so we'll leave that checkbox blank. And then finally, a reference for the terms and conditions page. In my case, I already have a terms and conditions page, so I'm going to select that checkbox and then identify the name of that page. You don't have to have one set up in advance when you run this GDPR wizard. This is something that you can add later. And then click Save. So you'll see another warning about the privacy policy itself, how, again, this is a bare bones policy that's being set up. You will need to make modifications based on your specific circumstances. We click Save in the wizard. You'll want to read through the forms and consent information. There are specific references to how to utilize forms on your site to ensure they're GDPR compliant. Plus, there are a number of links you've probably noticed throughout the wizard. You want to read through those. There's a lot of information that's very helpful for you to understand your responsibilities with GDPR. So I do have some forms already on my site, so I'm going to select the Custom Forms checkbox. When you do that, you simply get a reminder of what those forms need to contain. And I'll click Continue. You have some additional reminders of the privacy policy and the privacy tools reference and some recommendations for placement. And again, you have a handy link to read more information. I'm going to click Continue here. So now you have completed the wizard. You'll notice there's some additional information on this page. Again, very useful information to read. And right now, I'm going to go back to the dashboard so we can look at the privacy policy that was generated. So now we'll go back and look at those settings under Tools, Data 443 GDPR. Now, you can work through these tabs and you'll see the information that was requested by the wizard has been added into the settings. There are two areas that you do still need to confirm. Cookie pop-up. One of the features of GDPR is that people must accept cookies when they come to your site. It's important that you check the default settings here and modify them to suit your needs. So you definitely want the cookie acceptance pop-up enabled. I suggest you click to enable the checkbox for one-time acceptance. And you'll also want to look at what that pop-up says. Now there are some other formatting items here, but specifically make sure that you're comfortable with the wording within the pop-up. You can modify that if you choose. And also you can specify the location of the pop-up, the different theme, the different locations, the different theme that you would view in the pop-up. You want an accept and a decline, but you can again reword these to suit your purposes. And then you can also select where to go next. For the most part, I'm comfortable with the defaults, but the pop-up position and the theme you might want to modify for your own purposes. Also, under consent, if you scroll down to the bottom, if someone does access the Privacy Tools page, the text that appears you want to modify here. Again, adjust for your own purposes. For the most part, the generic text is fine, but review that, ensure that you are comfortable with it. And you can modify the formatting here as well, some basic formatting information. When you're happy with that, of course, you click Save, and then your privacy policy and the consent and other features are set up on your page. So let's go look at the privacy policy page. That's going to be under Pages, All Pages, and the privacy policy will be entitled Privacy Policy. When it's first set up, after you've completed the wizard, it will be in a draft stage. So you have the opportunity to modify the formatting and adjust things the way you prefer. So let's click Edit on that privacy policy page. And from here, you can modify the content. There is one particular thing I strongly recommend you do, and that's within the HTML itself. Specifically, email addresses are trolled throughout the web. And the last thing you want is to be bombarded by bots sending email to an email address you display on your site. There are a number of different ways to try to reduce that. I'm going to show you the one that I prefer. So from this classic view, you're going to need to access the HTML. So you'll want to click on the vertical ellipsis, the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner. And from here, you're going to select under Editor, you're going to select Code Editor. Now you're looking at the HTML. You're going to see a reference to the email address. So for example, typically it's a mail to email address. You want to modify that so that the email address is still displayed to the customer in a format that makes sense, but for the bots that troll and scoop the information from the HTML, it is nonsensical. So let me show you one of the recommended ways to do that and the method that I find useful. So you'll see the way the privacy policy is generated. The email address is actually a link, a hyperlink. What I suggest you do is not make it a link. So we're going to modify this. Instead of this being an anchor HTML reference, we're just going to make this a paragraph and change the perspective. So I've removed the anchor text, the HTML hyperlink, and instead it's mostly just text displaying the email address. The exception is in the middle. If you look at the highlighted text and consider that removed from your vision, then you see it's just an email address, sitemaster@wowitinc.com. The span in the middle adds something for the trolls. So specifically, you'll see the no display is an additional reference that gets added to the email address on the back end. So it's sitemaster no display info@wowitinc.com. That, of course, is not a real email address. So the bots trolling sites, they would not receive a valid email address from me, so I wouldn't get that frustration of spam, which is wonderful. What makes it not viewable to the users is this little section here, the style reference of display : none, semicolon. That does not display the information on screen. So if we were to click preview, and let's see what this looks like to someone viewing your site. So you'll see if you're reading along here, this just looks like a regular email address. And if you copy this text, a copy simply copies what's displayed on the screen. So you can still make this viewable fairly easily, and a user can still copy and paste this into an email. So you still have that usability factor for your audience, but yet you can avoid the bots and the trolling and the spam by doing this. So that's my suggestion. There are a lot of other different ways to do that, but this is the one that I suggest because it is relatively easy for you to do without knowing a huge amount of HTML. It's not too difficult to make the modification, and it's a fairly streamlined process for your user as well. So let's get out of the code editor and go back to the typical view of the Gutenberg Classic Editor. So we'll hit the X here. And again, even from the view here, you'll see it looks like a regular old email address. Now the rest of what you want to do is review the information on the screen, ensure that it has a decent form. You might want to add some spaces between rows, make things more readable. You might want to modify the sections, move things around a bit. A lot of different things you can do. And you also want to confirm that, in fact, you have done everything you can to ensure you're compliant for GDPR. So this is not a legally binding document that you're looking at here. Specifically, this is not generated by a lawyer. I am not a lawyer. The GDPR framework plugin does not pretend to be lawfully binding. So you need to perform due diligence still to ensure that what appears here is useful. And also, as you scroll down, you'll notice there are some sections that say to do, information you have provided us with. So you'd still need to make modifications to this information. It's not done yet. These to-do sections require your attention. You need to enter your own information here to complete what's required. Let me see if I can find another reference for you. Here's another to-do. So there's clarification on how your personal data is used. There's a to-do here because let's say you have ads on your site or affiliate links. You might need to add references for how personal data is used in those circumstances. So work through the file. Wherever you see to-do references, research what you need to add and then add it, and then check your formatting for all those situations as well. And once you have it all in a format that makes sense and it looks good, then you can publish this document and you're good to go. As you can see, it's not completely done for you, but having the structure and the format of a document prepared for you is huge. So now you just need to do your research, plug in the right information for your purposes. This is a really good way to kick off your privacy policy generation.